This thing is loading up here. It's Tuesday night. A lot going on. And it looks like now our YouTube stream is up and running. Let's get after it. Indiana brought the effort to start the game. They brought the intensity. They brought the focus. The offense moved down the field and scored first in that contest against the top 10 Michigan State team. And then just like we saw in pretty much every week up until this point, the skill players and the playmakers and the ball carriers and the blockers on that side of the field, on that side of the game, completely showed nothing the rest of the way. And that's why Indiana lost to Michigan State 20-15 on Saturday afternoon in Bloomington, dropping the Hoosiers to 2-4 on the season, 0-3 in Big Ten play. We're going to dive into that game and so much more here on episode 222 of the Hoosier Sound, the Triple Deuce. 222 of the Hoosier Sound. I am your host, Nithin Krishnan. Tonight, as usual, I am joined by my weekly co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, I know you were going crazy on the Hoosier Sound Twitter on Saturday. I know you watched that game in Bloomington on Saturday afternoon. What's going on? Where did all of this go wrong? This Indiana offense is pathetic at this point in the season. It's hard to expect them to beat Rutgers or Maryland or Minnesota, let alone Ohio State on Saturday. Why was that such a root canal type thing to watch on TV? Football's supposed to be fun game and fireworks. What happened?
Not with this team this year. Honestly, and it all boils down to this. It's that our offensive coordinator is not good enough to be in the position that he's at. Sorry, Nick Sheridan, like you had a decent year last year, but like it's time. Like I don't know what Tom Allen needs to see more of. Like this offense, we have 2 games in which we've lost the top 10 teams, in which we outgained the other offense because our defense played so well and the offense was unable in multiple opportunities to come up with a touchdown. It's unbelievable what we have to do to score and get game-winning plays done on the offensive end. And, you know, we've had a bye week and 6 games to figure it out.
You had a bye week to get better, and if anything, they regressed.
Yeah, exactly. So what I don't know what else you need to say. I know most Hoosier Nation agrees with me. Like I feel bad for the guy because like he had a good year last year, but Nick Sheridan's done. Like this is toast. Like if you're still like supporting him, like that's great, good for you. Like I hope he turns it around. But like there just can't be any way in which you like watch what is happening on the field and you go, yeah, this looks good.
Yeah, and look, I've dealt with Nick Sheridan in media sessions. He's a nice guy. He's someone who's putting in the effort. He's someone who is really trying to make this look as clean as possible. But I mean, I'm going to start with the blockbuster stat right here, Matt, right within the first 5 minutes. Indiana in 3 Big Ten games has 1 offensive touchdown.
Yeah.
In those 3 Big Ten games, the opposing defense has 2 touchdowns when Indiana's on the field. Yeah. Remember, Iowa had 2 pick sixes in week 1.
Yeah. And
Indiana has 1.
Michigan State threw on. We threw on.
And Michigan State has 1. You're right. So that's 3. Yeah. Indiana's offense has allowed 3 touchdowns in Big Ten play. And they've only scored 1.
Yeah. It's abysmal.
I've never seen that before. That's mind-blowing. I don't care, right? And this is the final time, literally a final time. And you're going to have to stay with this, Matt. This is the final time we're going to say the word schedule on this episode, okay? Because that's besides the point. Yeah. You can't have 3 Big Ten games like this where the offense has scored 1 touchdown in 3 games and given up 3. And look, we both watched that game on Saturday. The biggest play in the game happened when Cal Haladay, Michigan State's linebacker, read Jack Tuttle's eyes, took it past, and scored into the end zone. If you can't score on offense, you definitely can't allow scores to the opposing defense, because here's the deal. Michigan State fans right now, they're probably frustrated that their offense looks so pathetic. And IU fans, right? Your defense is spectacular.
Yeah.
This defense is incredible. And you know you're running your program right when guys like Noah Pierre and Josh Sanguinetti step up, because Tywan Mullen can't play, because Reese Taylor's shorthanded. You see the superstars deliver. Micah McFadden was once again everywhere on the field, sacking the quarterback,
yes,
inserting himself all over the game. But you can't continue this type of sloppiness on the offensive side of the ball. And the sad part is that game was so winnable.
Mm-hmm.
It went exactly how I expected it to go when we made our predictions on this show last week. I said Indiana is going to go up against a team that has slightly overachieved to this point, a team that made a lot of headlines with their wins, but the teams they had beaten had really struggled since. Michigan State went to Northwestern and won. Northwestern's not good. Michigan State went to Miami and won. Miami's not good. And I was expecting Indiana to come off a bye week and look really good, and it just so happened that the Hoosiers regressed on offense, which is completely mind-blowing, because previously, under the Tom Allen era, Indiana had looked really good coming off of a bye.
Yeah, that's true. And I'd like to point, like, obviously that game sucked, and we should never talk about it again after this podcast. And the offense needs to be fired into the sun. But I would like to give props where props are due, and that is to the defensive staff, because this defense is good. Obviously the bye week came at a great time. Remember, before this game, we were 117th in the country in sacks. And we had a good defense. We weren't sacking the quarterback. We got multiple sacks.
Yep.
Or tackles for loss that could have been counted as sacks, basically, but tackles for loss on Saturday. Getting pressure on the quarterback consistently. There was significant improvement in that. And they did their job over the bye week. That can't be said for a lot of people. By the way, the special teams coach too might be looking at his job as well. Punting game is awful. Our punter is absolutely terrible. I know we've gotten used to having good punters the last couple of years.
Hayden Whitehead, man, he was an absolute superstar as far as punting goes. Frankly, I'm surprised he hasn't gotten a shot in the NFL, but then again, there are only 32 of them. It's hard to make the cut. Right.
But he is a really good punter. So we got spoiled the last couple of years, but the punting game hasn't been cutting it. The offense is just terrible in every facet. The defense held a Heisman contender running back to under 100 yards rushing. Could barely get anything done on the offensive end running the ball. They scored 17 points on offense. Like, if you're the opposing team scores 17 points on offense in 2021, you should win that game 99 times out of 100. Like, this is not 1996 where 17-14 games are the normal. Like, your offense should be at least able to score 24 to 30 points a game. That's just how offense goes now. And this IU team hasn't been able to approach the 30 mark outside of the Idaho game and then the Western Kentucky game, in which they had to score that many points to win. So it's just been super frustrating. And I don't see it getting any better this weekend.
No, I will say Ohio State's defense has had some questions, but again, Michigan State secondary had some questions coming into this game. And the way you saw Indiana attack Michigan State secondary with Ty Freifogel and with Peyton Hendershot gave you optimism that the Hoosiers were going to have a successful day through the air. But of course, when you don't have that type of prolific offense that can continue to put the opposing team's weaknesses under examination, then you're really digging yourselves into a big hole. Again, it's an absolute wonder that Indiana could have won that game at the end of the fourth quarter. The defense deserves all the credit in the world. I love the comment by Tim Durking in the live chat, and he makes an interesting point here, Matt. Back in the day, it's probably about 5-10 years ago, Indiana had an amazing offense and a terrible defense. But at least in those days, the games were a lot more fun to watch. And that's where you really do. It's a lot of what reminds me a lot of what we saw with IU basketball last year, right? If you have that defensive mentality, you have got to win games because it doesn't look like anybody on the offensive side of the ball. And let me know if you agree with this. Nobody looks like they're having a good time.
I don't think anybody on the team is having a good time. I know Tom Allen talked about in the press conference that it's been tough. The guys, the mood around the locker room is not all butterflies and rainbows, right? I wouldn't be surprised if it was, because they have played terribly, especially with the the optimism and the expectations going into this year surrounding the program.
Yeah, Indiana is 12th in scoring as far as the Big Ten is concerned. But if you want to look at even a more nightmarish stat, Indiana's averaging just 4.5 yards per play this season, which is last in the Big Ten. And that's just not how you get the job done. IU is 12th as far as rushing yards per game is concerned, and it's not great through the air either. The Hoosiers are 7th in passing yards per game, but it's only at 216 passing yards per game through the air. There are a lot of other poor passing offenses in the Big Ten, like Rutgers, Northwestern. You saw Iowa really struggle to throw the ball against Purdue on Saturday.
Yeah, so, by the way, how bad did Iowa look against Purdue on Saturday?
Horrible, Matt. Yeah. And this is the thing, right? I mean, I went and looked at that game going into it, and I said, if Indiana can just execute on offense, they can win it. And then I went into the Penn State game, and I said, if Indiana can just execute on offense, they can win it. And then I went into the Michigan State game, saying if Indiana can execute on offense, they can win it because the defense is so good. Except here is where we are. So, Matt, let's talk about the big question. If Indiana does move on from Nick Sheridan in the offseason, there are a lot of interesting ways IU can go with this. And again, I don't get the sense right now from Tom Allen that a midseason move is imminent, nothing like that. I do get the sense from being on the Zoom calls that Tom Allen is livid over the performance of his offense, because Tom Allen, right, being a defensive person, he's relying on that play caller to get the job done as far as moving the ball down the field is considered. There are a lot of different ways to go about this, Matt. What are your high-level thoughts? I don't know if you have any candidates in mind to be IU's next play caller, but what's the kind of offensive coordinator that you think can really prosper at IU? Do you think it's a young guy versus a veteran coordinator? Do you think it's a group of 5 guy versus a power 5 guy or versus an NFL guy? Do you see someone in-house that could step up? We're just speculating here, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I think we've tried the in-house route. Again, a lot of our staff actually comes from the Mike DeBoard era, not the Kalen DeBoer era, the Mike DeBoard era.
Yep.
And that's actually where Nick Sheridan actually came from originally in the first place. And to be honest, that route didn't work. So I wouldn't want to see us promote from within. Mm-hmm. Like I said, when Kalen DeBoer left, we should have gone and gotten one of the best, hottest young offensive coordinators from a group of 5 school. I even posted it on the Hoosier Sound Twitter earlier this week. I want a sexy, fun,
are you physically handsome? That's what you're going after.
I mean, if he ends up looking like a supermodel, that's fine too.
I'm just kidding. Yeah.
But I want an offense that I'm excited to watch. I know when I watched Western Kentucky's offense when we played them, that offense is fun to watch, and they get their players in really good positions, and it's a bit complicated and it's hard for defenses to get ready for.
Their offense put up literally 600 yards, give or take a few, against Michigan State.
Yeah.
On the road, not in Bowling Green, Kentucky, but in East Lansing.
Yeah. So I don't know. Throw the IU credit union at it. I don't know. There's certain offenses you look around the group of 5 and you go, wow, that's fun to watch. Or even like somebody that's like slightly proven at the group of 5 level. Remember, there's really good group of 5 teams that aren't going to be in conference expansion, right? Boise State is one of them, who is a really good. I like Boise State's offense for what I've seen from them. UCF is an expansion, so you want to go after them, but maybe somebody like a Utah State, or like those kind of group of five programs you look at and you go, wow, that looks like a fun offense to play under. Like something that the staff should really look at.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Zach Hitley is a name that I've seen tossed around on social media. He's Western Kentucky's offensive coordinator. To give you a little bit of background on him, he was a GA at Texas Tech during the Patrick Mahomes era, and he's been able to bounce some ideas off of Mahomes, as well as really prosper in his role at Western Kentucky. Hitley is 30 years old. Of course, the current coach at Western Kentucky is Tyson Helton, brother of Clay Helton, who I know he suffered a pretty ominous ending with the Trojans, but at least he was somebody who got the job at one point, which is definitely a worthy accomplishment, to say the least. Hitley was also the offensive coordinator at Houston Baptist for the 3 previous seasons before 2021, working with Bailey Zappi, who's his quarterback. By the way, Western Kentucky wide receiver Jarrett Stearns, somebody who had a really good game against Indiana, really good game against Michigan State. He was named a midseason All-American according to the Associated Press. So you can see Hitley's influence already on a number of different guys there. To me, I absolutely love the idea of going after a group of 5 coordinator. Young versus veteran, to me, not so much of a big deal. But what I've realized as I've watched Indiana more and more over the years, Mike DeBoard, as well as Nick Sheridan, are guys that have experienced big time heavyweight college football, right? At the Michigans of the world, at the Texases of the world, at the Tennessees of the world. And there you can run a big time macho, muscular, heavy offense where, you don't really have to rely on flash and lightning and explosiveness, because you just recruit these big, beefy offensive linemen that are 5-star and high 4-star grades. But what you really, and when those 2 specific coordinators came to Bloomington, you saw that the success rate just wasn't as high, because all of a sudden, if your offensive linemen are about 20 pounds lighter, and if your tight end isn't a first-round NFL draft prospect, and you don't have a guy like Alvin Kamara in your backfield, then all of a sudden, right, you start to see the performance deteriorate a little bit. And all of a sudden, like whether it's Mike DeBoer or Nick Sheridan, you kind of look at it and you go, man, we just got to execute a little better. Man, we just got to convert in the red zone. And those are basically filler answers, because frankly, I don't think they have legitimate solutions to how to solve this problem, because in previous stops, I've just seen it work.
Yeah.
At a group of 5 level, what you're going to see is somebody who all of a sudden now has so much more physical talent available to him at a 2 deep and at a 3 deep level. And that's why somebody like Zach Hitley out of Western Kentucky, or offensive coordinators at like a place like Coastal Carolina or a Utah State, like you mentioned, can come to Bloomington, of course, buy into Tom Allen's mission and Tom Allen's vision at IU, and really see this offense accelerate, because all of a sudden they're doing more with less rather than less with more. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. I think that's right. I think something like that. They're able to come in and implement their offensive game plan without having to with additional talent on their hands. So to me, the mission for Allen in the offseason is to target some offensive coordinators that have really prospered this year, offensive coordinators that have really succeeded this year at the group of 5 level, and see how interested they are in running this IU offense, because I don't think the recruits are going to flee IU. I don't think the recruits are going to flee Tom Allen. I think the offensive players that committed to the school, committed to the program, committed to the school, committed to the culture, which I don't think will change no matter what. So all of a sudden, you're going to have a lot more to work with. We did ask this question in our weekly podcast poll. If IU were to look for a new offensive coordinator in the offseason, what kind of play caller would you want? And the options were A, young guy, Power 5 or NFL level; B, young guy, group of 5 level; C, veteran at the Power 5 or NFL level, and then D, veteran at the Group of 5 level. And right now, the leader is a young guy from the Power 5 or NFL level. And I would just caution that if you're an IU fan out there, because, if you get a hot, exciting offensive coordinator who's doing great at Florida State or Tennessee or, you name it, Wake Forest, maybe. Wake Forest, I know, has had a really good season. And all of a sudden they come to Indiana and realize, it's harder to execute in the Big Ten. In this level, I would just caution that. And Matt, what are your, you said get a young guy at the Group of 5 level as well. Are you surprised to hear that only 13% of people voted for that?
Yeah, but also I can see you put NFL on there, right? And I can see people being like an NFL guy, and I agree. If you can go to the next level of football and poach somebody, we got Glenn McCullough, right?
Right.
But if you can poach somebody even at a higher position than him from an NFL team, by all means, please do. Not going to happen, but please do.
Mm-hmm.
But Group of 5 is much more likely. Again, it's the logical next step. You look, Kalen DeBoer did the same thing. Remember, he was offensive coordinator at Fresno State.
Perfect.
Came
example.
to IU.
Yeah.
The blueprint is there for somebody to do that. It's very marketable. You don't have to worry about anything else other than you're just in charge of offensive coordinators are usually just in charge of the offense, but at IU, you legitimately have full control of the offense, which is very different from in most schools. That's extremely, extremely enticing for young coordinators who want to become coaches fast. So somebody like Western Kentucky's coordinator, right, who's 30 and want to become a young head coach, you only need 1 or 2 years of play calling in Bloomington, where you look good, your play calling is good, and your offense is good, you're gonna get calls from high level Group of 5 programs wanting to be your the next head coach of that program. If he is on track to do that, IU can offer him that possibility for sure. And also, I'd like to point out one thing, and that is the Kalen DeBoers of the world, those explosive offenses, those offenses that are a little bit out of the ordinary and not your pro style, not high level offenses. That's what the game of football is going towards.
Right.
That's the future. That's the past is the kind of offense that we're running now, where you ground and pound and play action, play calls, and that kind of stuff is just becoming the norm and the past. We need an offensive coordinator that's on the cutting edge. The future of football. We had that with Kevin Wilson. I know we just talked about it. It was games were fun. We scored a lot of points. That's true. We had a great offense, and look what he's doing at Ohio State, right? So, IU needs to get back on the forefront of offensive pioneering.
Absolutely. Yards per attempt keep getting higher and higher. The rules of the game obviously keep favoring the offenses more and more. And along those lines, right, thinking back to that Michigan State game on Saturday, it was really eye-popping to me. This just caught my attention. I don't even know how important this is, but it just caught my attention that Michigan State, the team that held the lead in the second half, was running. Michigan State was the team that was running trick plays where their tight end threw their quarterback. And they ran a flea flicker as well in the second half. And I'm saying, well, that's the exact kind of stuff that could spark this offense. So, I would really like the offensive coordinator as well to have a little bit better of a feel for the game. Just some mid-majors, some Group of 5 schools that have succeeded offensively so far this year, as far as a point per game standard is concerned: Coastal Carolina, Western Kentucky, SMU, Texas San Antonio. They found themselves ranked in the top 25 now. Marshall, UCF, no surprise, Tulane as well. And of course, UCF, of course, that Florida connection that Tom Allen has, perhaps something that IU could look into. Interesting that SMU's offensive coordinator, Garrett Riley, he's the younger brother of Oklahoma head coach Lincoln Riley. So just curious, that poll that I mentioned on Twitter, is available at the Hoosier Sound. You can follow us on Twitter if you haven't already. We also retweeted it over on Indiana HQ, and it's only been up for about half an hour here. Great to see the votes pouring in. Again, 49% of you chose young guy at the Power 5 or NFL level. That leads the way. I would just be cautious because of the reasons we talked about just a moment ago. So Indiana falls to 2-4, 0-3 in Big Ten play, and now the Hoosiers have a matchup awaiting them against Ohio State. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports, where we look around the scope of Indiana University athletics. And hey, I'm going to tip my cap to a couple of guys we haven't really talked about too much on this podcast since they made the NFL. But how about Ian Thomas and Nick Westbrook Akina, who have made NFL rosters, and Thomas had a huge 40-yard catch for Carolina as they were trying to come from behind to beat Minnesota on Saturday afternoon. Thomas was somebody who was here during the Mike DeBoard era, and he was a mid-round NFL draft pick. He had a huge 40-yard catch over the middle, helping Carolina tie that game. Unfortunately for Ian, the Vikings won in overtime. Nick Westbrook continues his successful season with Tennessee. On Monday Night Football, he had 3 catches for 41 yards, very effective. He also had a big run block on Derrick Henry's 76-yard touchdown yesterday that caught the attention of a lot of folks. So it's great to see Hoosiers succeeding in the NFL. Of course, who can say this segment without mentioning Kyle Schwarber, who had a grand slam for the Boston Red Sox. No big deal as Boston continues their path to try to make the World Series, which would be Schwarber's second trip to the Fall Classic. Quick reminder, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. Also, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. All right, Matt, let's talk about Ohio State. It was supposed to be exciting. This was supposed to be a rematch in Bloomington of that explosive, exciting game in Columbus last year that was watched by nobody in the shoe because of the pandemic. And now we're going to have a full house at Memorial Stadium. It's supposed to be riveting stuff. And now Ohio State is a 20.5-point favorite against the Hoosiers on Saturday night in Bloomington. The Buckeyes are coming off a bye. They've been bumped up to number 5 in the AP poll, even though they lost earlier this year to Oregon. The game will be on ABC. It's the first home primetime game for Indiana on ABC in school history. That's a pretty interesting note. I can't wait to see what Memorial Stadium looks like under the lights. But as I mentioned, IU is a 20.5-point underdog. The over-under is 60, so you can make the projection there. Indiana is supposed to fall in this game by a note of 40-20. Matt, Ohio State has so many studs. Not really sure where to start. I know that CJ Stroud, their quarterback, is the third favorite right now to win the Heisman Trophy. Travion Henderson and Master Teague are a beastly backfield. Yeah. Great offensive line with Thayer Munford and DeJuan Jones, the former Ben Davis player. Wide receiver, killer trio of Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jackson Smith, and Jigba. A defense that has so much talent, guys like Zach Harrison, Haskell Garrett, some questions in the back seven, but Matt, overall, it's not so much that Indiana can't pull off the upset. It's just that right now the vibe around the team is just so demoralizing. What are one or two matchups you're looking at for this game if IU is going to pull off the W?
IU's defensive line versus Ohio State's offensive line. If IU's going to pull off the victory, they're going to have to do what Oregon did to Ohio State, and that is disrupt CJ Stroud's rhythm. If they can do that, IU has a chance if their offense decides to revert back to last year's form. Otherwise, I don't really see this game winning at all. But the defense obviously needs to play their best game of the year so far, and in a year in which they've played some marvelous games that we haven't won. Also, we're going to need good health luck, by the way, because look, their wide receiver core is nasty. And I know last week our backup corners did very well, but we need Taiwan back we need Reese Taylor back, because Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave are a killer duo. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba also is nothing to scoff at.
No.
Even Travion Henderson, when he is involved in the passing game, is actually so electric. So
Yeah.
IU really needs to watch out. This is an explosive Ohio State offense.
Yeah, big plays without a doubt. You can look at the box scores and see that opposing quarterbacks have succeeded pretty considerably against this Buckeye secondary. Oregon was able to run on them as well. It's interesting, right? Tulsa's quarterback, for example, Davis Brin, went 31 of 54 for 428 through the air, even though Tulsa fell short in that game. Talia Tagovailoa had a really good game for Maryland. So Indiana will have an advantage as far as receivers versus DBs are concerned with Ty Freifogel and with Miles Marshall, Javon Swinton and Jacoby Hewitt. But they had that advantage last week. So, it's going to be incumbent on this IU offense to make adjustments over there. Matt, as I look at this game, it's going to be one of those situations where Indiana's got to make one or two chaos plays in this game. You're going to have to try to steal possessions if possible. Maybe you sneak in an onside kick. Maybe you try to slip in a fake punt. Much like the Buffalo Bills did yesterday on Monday night, you've got to go for it on some of those 4th and shorts to really make sure you push those field goals into touchdowns, or you push those 0-point possessions into 3. You got to have a bit of a riverboat quality to this game when you're calling, when you're making decisions from the sideline. You're going to have to try to deflect a pass or two and pick it off, and maybe even return it for a touchdown, right? And one of the sneaky plays of that Penn State game is when Raheem Lane intercepted Sean Clifford. And in hindsight, you kind of go, wait, could Raheem Lane have done more to try to score the ball into the end zone as he returned that interception? If Indiana has a chance to return a field goal or an interception for a touchdown, you almost have to look at it and say it is worth the risk to maybe lateral the football or to try some sort of chicanery in order to get that ball into the end zone. I remember a play where Ryder Anderson strip sacked Desmond Ridder in week 3, and Micah McFadden recovered the football after the Cincinnati offensive lineman tried to pick it up and run with it, and Indiana returned it, but it returned it to the 9-yard line. So Indiana's defense is due for a touchdown. That's the kind of stuff that has to happen in this game. Matt, I have one or two guys in mind that really need to step up for IU, but I'll ask you first. Who are one or two Hoosiers that you need to see really bring their A game if IU is going to pull off the upset as 20-point underdogs?
Tuttle has to step up. I think that's pretty obvious. Nick Sheridan needs to step up. Yeah. And he's not a player, but
of course, yeah,
he is a play caller. He needs to call his best game. And then the third player for me is Ryder Anderson. I think he needs to step up. Like I said, defensive line needs to get pressure on the quarterback. Yeah,
I think that's a great point. To me, one player that we really need to see step up is Ty Freifogel. I thought Ty Fry actually had a pretty good game on Saturday. I saw him involved early and often, and early, not often. And that's where my concern is for Indiana. Freifogel had 7 catches in that game, but if I recall, 3 of them came in the first quarter, and the final 4 came really when Indiana was passing on pretty much every single play down the stretch of that game. So I want to see a more spread out attention as far as Ty Freifogel is concerned. Peyton Hendershot, I continue to like what I see out of Peyton Hendershot in the passing game. His run blocking is obviously extremely important given Indiana struggles up front. But if Peyton Hendershot, who by the way scored against Ohio State back in 2019, if he can make a big splash in this game, whether it's a 50-yard catch or go up and put 10 receptions on the board for 110, 120 yards, I think that could be an avenue for Indiana to win this game. And then lastly, I'm really keying in on Indiana's safeties, Devon Matthews and Raheem Lane. Can you make sure that 15 to 20-yard passes don't turn into 75-yard touchdowns? Keeping Ohio State's offense on the field for 6 or 7 or 8 plays rather than just those 1 or 2 play home run hitting drives, I think will all be really important as far as the Hoosiers goals and objectives are concerned. IU has not beaten the Buckeyes since 1988. So, in a year where there have been a lot of frustrations and a lot of huffing and puffing and shrugging, Indiana could make a little history. And I mean, all it takes is one great 3.5 hour performance and things can get kind of interesting. Look, I don't know. All I'm saying is football's weird. It's unscripted. Anything can happen. I'm not going to give you my predictions just yet in this game. But first, it's time for our social media shout out where we'll look across Facebook or Twitter or Instagram and see if there's anything we wanted to tip our cap to. And hey, I know everyone's got all sorts of opinions about Dick Vitale, but there's no question that he is a college basketball legend, somebody who's been in the game for, I think literally more than 50 years, starting as a head coach at the University of Detroit and then moving on to his prominent role as an ESPN commentator. He's going through, I believe, 2 separate cancer diagnoses over a pretty short window here, which is tough to see somebody who has all the enthusiasm and excitement in the world when calling a college basketball game. Frankly, I think more commentators of different sports can use that. I'm sick and tired of watching baseball or football games where all I hear is criticism of today's modern day player. Dick Vitale loves the game. He's going through some treatments, going through some surgeries right now. So we're all thinking about him. Matt, I know you love watching Dick Vitale on ESPN. He's somebody who I know we're all thinking positively about, isn't he?
Absolutely, 100%. He's a national treasure, just like Bill Walton, by the way. I know right. IU fans don't like him, but they are both. But college basketball wouldn't be the same without either of them. So,
along the lines of college basketball, one thing I did see is that Andy Katz, Big Ten basketball analyst, did have Indiana 14th.
I saw that and I was like, I like what he's. Look. I don't know what he's thinking, but I like what he's thinking. That's all.
Along
I like where his head's at.
In a similar vein, Indiana's men's team was just on the outside looking in as far as the preseason AP top 25 is concerned. The Hoosiers were second among teams receiving votes, but not getting into the top 25. Michigan State was 26th. Indiana was 27th. So kind of interesting there as we head into the season starting in about 3 weeks. The IU women's team came in number 8 in the preseason top 25. They have 3 top 15 matchups in non-conference play. To circle back to the men's team real quickly, no one on IU's men's basketball non-conference schedules in the top 25. Syracuse and St. John's, as well as Notre Dame, were all receiving votes, but none of them got into the top 25. So that's something to,
We are playing a preseason All-American, though, Buddy Boeheim.
We are, which is kind of an interesting twist there. I know Julian Champagny of St. John's is getting plenty of recognition as well. So some big players on Indiana's non-conference schedule, but team-wise, interesting to see no one crack the top 25. Just a reminder, you can catch us on all the social media platforms you can think of: Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. We're Indiana HQ and the Hoosier Sound on those platforms. Matt, we do have an Instagram, but on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ. We are what?
Indiana.HQ.
That's right. And that's where you can follow us over there to get all the wonderful pictures and videos from all the games we're credentialed to. And you better believe we're going to have some content up there from this upcoming Saturday when Indiana takes on Ohio State. Matt, let's get into our predictions and then dive into some Big Ten picks of the week to wrap things up. Ohio State, Matt. Ohio State comes to Bloomington. They're number 5 in the AP poll. The metrics love them even more than a 5th-ranked team. Rough loss to Oregon back in week 2. They've seemed to have righted the ship here, scoring at least 41 points in each of their last 4 games, all victories. They've scored at least 52 in each of their last 3 games, all victories. Then again, those games have come against Tulsa, Akron, Rutgers, and Maryland. So as you look at this matchup, Matt, who wins? Ohio State, Indiana, and by how much?
Ohio State wins by a lot. I think it's going to be 45-14, Ohio State. I don't think it's going to be close. I think the offense throws about 2 pick sixes. And it's going to be a bad night in what should be a celebration in Bloomington for finally getting on national television. But
yeah, get what you're saying. Understandable that you think Ohio State would put up a crooked number against the Hoosiers. I just think this could be a trap game for the Buckeyes. Okay. Look, this is an interesting nugget that I stumbled across the other day. This is an interesting nugget I came across the other day. The 4 best teams in the Big Ten East, and you could probably argue the Big Ten as well at this point, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, and Penn State, are yet to play each other. Even in one pairing. None of those games have happened yet.
Sure.
And Ohio State's got, as you can imagine, those other 3 teams coming up on their schedule. So I would not be surprised if Indiana started out this game fired up, pumped, taking a deep shot, working, feeding off the crowd. But I also think this game will go along the lines of the way the 2017 home game against Ohio State went to start the season. Or maybe IU starts out aggressive, IU takes a halftime lead, but then Ohio State's just physical gifts and attention to detail wear you down over the course of 4 quarters. I do think Indiana's defense will once again do a good job. I don't think Ohio State's going to hit the 40-point mark, but I think Ohio State's going to come away with a 34-17 win in Bloomington and move their season to 6-1. And now, of course, Ohio State will focus on some of these big time matchups against Penn State, and Michigan coming up. And then Indiana, right, Matt? I mean, we don't have to dive into this, but IU pretty much has to win at Maryland, against Rutgers, against Minnesota, and at Purdue to get the 6 wins. Unless you think they can go to Michigan and win. So off the top of your head, is that happening or no?
No.
There you go. All right, you heard it from Matt right there. We'll dive into that more as the rest of the season goes on. But right now, it looks like the road to 6 wins is quite bumpy for this Indiana Hoosier football team. Matt, the last thing, as we normally like to do on these podcast episodes, is take a look at the Big Ten schedule and see if there's a pick against the spread we like. Is there a pick as far as an upset special that we like? Last week, we were a little off on our upset picks. You thought Army was going to go to Wisconsin and win. I thought Indiana was going to win at home against Michigan State. Both of those games were 1 score. So you were in the action, but unfortunately, both of those favorites ended up winning. Hey, I did think Minnesota was going to cover 4 points at home against Nebraska, and what a surprise. Scott Frost's team let everyone down once again. So Nebraska, hey, if you thought it was bad at IU, hey, Nebraska's probably going to miss a bowl game for another season, which is really embarrassing. Matt, as you look at this 5-game Big Ten slate coming up this Saturday, is there a pick against the spread that you like? And is there an upset pick that you like when looking at these games?
Yeah, so I like Minnesota to cover against Maryland. They're favored by 5. And then I like Purdue to upset Wisconsin.
Ooh, I like that. Minnesota -5. Yeah. My pick against the spread is going to be Northwestern covering 23.5 at Michigan. That's a situation where Northwestern's a team, we've watched them quite a bit. They play slow, defense first football team. By no means am I saying Northwestern's going to win that game. I just think Northwestern will keep it close, closer than 23.5. And my upside pick is going to be the other side of that Maryland-Minnesota game. I actually think Maryland is going to go into Minneapolis and win. I've seen the Big Ten East do some great things against the Big Ten West this season outside of Indiana. And I just look at Maryland and I see Talia Tagovailoa, and I think he's the better quarterback in that game. So I think he's gonna find a way to get Maryland to the finish line against the Gophers. So we'll keep track of how those picks go over the course of that Saturday afternoon. I like how both of us stayed away from Indiana, Ohio State, which is kind of interesting. I'm sure there are a lot of people around college football that kind of feel the same way. So Matt, as we wind down here on Tuesday night, what are your closing thoughts? Indiana's offense is such a mess. The defense continues to bring their A game, but the Hoosiers are staring at a 2-4 record right now. What are your final thoughts on this episode?
I'm just excited for basketball season to start up soon. That's my final thoughts.
Well, you were just talking before we started tonight. The NBA season just started, and college basketball season is around the corner. Should be a really fun time. As far as this IU football team is considered, Matt, my final thought is all the frustration, all the annoyances, all the noise and the mumbling and the grumbling can all be eliminated with one great Saturday night.
Yeah, that'd be nice. That would be nice.
And we will remember this game for the rest of our lives if Indiana can just put it together for 3.5 hours, from top to bottom, from the head coach to the backups. All it takes is one game to completely change the narrative. All right. That's the way football works. So this is your shot, Hoosiers, and we'll see what they do on Saturday night. But that about wraps it up for our 222nd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You're all beautiful people. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find everything in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will